Welcome to the Positively You podcast. I'm your host, Jessie Larson, and I'm passionate about helping you shift the way you think so you can create a life you're absolutely obsessed with. Each week, I'll be bringing you a guest or a thought that's going to help you feel more optimistic and equipped to take real action. Get ready to push past limiting beliefs, ditch that negativity, and start showing up as the best and most positive version of you. Girl, let's do this. Hey, welcome back to the Positively You podcast. I'm Jessie, and I'm so excited to have you here with me today. Today has been such a good day. The weather is just gorgeous. I mean, it's like overcast and cloudy, but it's been 105 degrees here like the last week. So the overcast, cloudy, moody fall vibes I'm just like living for. As soon as I'm done here, I'm gonna go bake some pumpkin bread and turn on like some Taylor Swift and just lean so fully into the fall vibes. I'm so excited. So that's kind of what I'm loving right now today. And I hope that there is something good today that you are loving as well, whether it's the weather or whatever it is. Find something that you love about today. So let's get into the episode. Now, so many times I get ideas for like what I want to come on here and talk about at not the most random times, but at a time where I can't like write it down and make sure that I have the idea fully get out of my head. It's usually in the shower. That's where all the good ideas come, right? Or like driving down the freeway or something and I get just an inspiration. And I'm like, I can't write it down right now. Or like dreaming. And when you wake up and like you remember your dream and then 5 minutes later it's gone. And so if you don't write the thing down right then, it's like, oh, where did it go? So fortunately, I did have this idea the other day. I was laying in bed and I was kind of waking up. It was like a lazy weekend. And I didn't want to forget this one because I was like, oh, I think that's good. Now, truth be told, I did forget a little bit of it because in my head, as I was waking up and fresh from dreamland, it was like absolute gold. So hopefully I get what I want to out to you. It makes sense. Wow. I can tell I'm doing a real good job here. All right. Well, the idea was this, it's the idea of perfection, right? And striving for perfection. And I think we've done really well with like shifting the narrative and the talk around that from being like, listen, nobody's perfect and let's strive for progress instead of perfection. Like every move forward is a good move, which I 100% agree with. Growing up, like the goal, I just remember always having that goal be perfection, but knowing like I never could be perfect because I'm human. And like even like everyone around me was still striving for perfection. And all of us knew we couldn't get there, but like it was still the goal. And so we were still supposed to try to get as close as we could. Anyway, I'm glad the narrative is changing a little bit and the conversation is changing around perfection because it's just such an unattainable goal. And I was laying in bed and I had this thought kind of come to me and I was like, what if instead of striving for perfection, that we completely flip it and strive for imperfection? And the idea kind of hit me and I was like, that's interesting. And you're probably thinking the same thing. Like, why on earth would I strive for imperfection? And so let's dive in a little bit because this is a thought that I sat there with for a moment. And like I said, when I was in like the depths of dreamland, it made a lot of sense to me. So here's me trying to take that and put it into a podcast. But when we are in an energy of imperfection and like a focus of that, I personally believe that we're more willing to try. That we're more willing to step out of our comfort zones. We're more willing to be a beginner. We're more willing to ask for help and accept help. We are more willing to make mistakes and own up to our mistakes, right? Because if our focus is on that imperfection, then it's okay. It's okay for all of that stuff. It's okay to like be brand new, to like feel like the idiot, to ask for help and to not feel ashamed of asking for help because you're like, listen, I'm not perfect at this. Like I've never done this before. And we open ourselves up to so much more when we're living in that energy of striving for like imperfection versus perfection. Because if you think about it, perfection really is a shield. It's a barrier. It's a wall. Like perfection pushes people and things away. When we are striving for perfection, we can't let anyone see anything other than that. And so we're guarded. We've got a wall up. We've got a boundary up. If perfection is the goal and is the energy that we're living in, we can't let others really see us. And that's not where we want to be, right? We don't want to be these not really perfect, but like look like we're perfect people who aren't connected to anybody. That's not fun. So how do we flip that? Like if we are someone, like if you self-identify as like, okay, I am a perfectionist, which I didn't think I was a perfectionist. And then I looked into my procrastination tendencies and it was like a light bulb went off and I was like, oh, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting off doing all of these things because I'm not going to do them perfectly. And that was a very interesting revelation for me. So maybe if you don't identify as a perfectionist, maybe like ask yourself if maybe you might be and you just need to think about it a different way. Because I was there for sure. And or like if you're not willing to step out of your comfort zone, if you're not willing to try new things, if you don't like being a person that makes mistakes, right? Like all of these things. So how do we shift then into this idea of striving for imperfection? And what does that mean? Because if you're like, okay, so I can just get away with like doing a crap job on everything, I can get away with half-assing it, like what does that even mean? And I think it's actually the opposite of that. I don't think it's that you go by in life with like, all right, well, there's no standard, so like whatever I show up as is great. I think actually when you understand that imperfection is okay and living in that energy of like imperfection, it actually propels you forward. Because think about it. How many times have you said no to something because you wouldn't be good at it? Like, is there a new skill that you've thought of? You're like, oh, I couldn't do that. Or a new workout class you want to go to, but you couldn't do that. I remember when I first started venturing into like the weight area of the gym, and I know I use this example all the time, but it's something that like I identify with. Like, if I wouldn't have been in an energy of showing up and being able to make mistakes and being a beginner and being quote unquote imperfect, I wouldn't have stepped in there. And I didn't for a long time. I held myself back. Same thing with this podcast. This podcast is the furthest thing from perfection. And I held myself back for years before launching this because I wasn't willing to show up as a beginner. I wasn't willing to show up and make mistakes and maybe feel silly and ask for help and be vulnerable. So look at maybe all of the opportunities that you are missing out on if you're not willing to start them in an energy and in a focus of being imperfect. When we can live in this energy, when we can shift from perfection to imperfection, so many things change. And how can you do that? So number one, I always start lists like this and then I never actually have like numbers. So look for opportunities to be a beginner. Like, are there things that are calling to you but you've like really pushed off? Like look for those and then embrace them. Also, acknowledging your mistakes is so huge, right? As perfectionists, like that's the last thing we want to do is look at where we've made mistakes, look at like where we've done something wrong. We just want to be like, no, I'm good. Like, let's only look at the good parts of me. But if you can look at your mistakes and use those as like, just as like data, of like, okay, this is information that I can take in. And if I change this or if I tweak this, how can I grow? Or what can I learn from this? Like your mistakes and where you are imperfect can be such a huge tool for you in personal growth. Like, oh my gosh, so much gold is in your mistakes and in your shortcomings if you're willing to look at them and use them as that, as use them as just information and as a springboard for growth. Huge, 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 huge. On the flip side of that, celebrate your wins, and no matter how small they are, celebrate the crap out of your wins. And this is not the first time I've said this, and it's not going to be the last time I say this either. We do not give ourselves enough credit. Like, I don't care how little it is, celebrate your wins. And they might be like really silly. Like mine is like when I start meal planning and do better, and I actually do like 4 meals in a row, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I did that. Like we did 4 meals in a row. I'm so freaking proud of myself. Now, that might be silly, right? But no, celebrate your wins. Pump yourself up. Like when you can do that, when you've got your back and you are the pump up person behind you, it's easier to be in that imperfection mode because your mindset is coming from a place of like, you've got this. Like, let's grow. Let's keep going. Let's celebrate where we are. Instead of that mean girl and that critical girl who sometimes lives in our head instead of like, yeah, but you didn't do this. Or, right? We've got that voice in our head sometimes that the negative one wins out. And part of being able to live in this imperfection energy is being able to kick that negative voice out and live with that positive voice. As you're celebrating your wins and as you're looking into your mistakes and in your shortcomings, that positive voice is going to be super helpful. And I also think the last and probably the most important part that as I was thinking about this like shift from perfection to imperfection was the connection with other people. Like I said, perfection is a shield. It really is. It's such a wall that we put in front of ourselves. And when we can slowly begin to tear that down, we connect so much better with other people. So being willing to be open, being willing to be vulnerable, being willing to like share our mistakes, because I bet you $1,000 that when you share your mistakes and share your vulnerabilities and your imperfections, someone else is going to say, oh my gosh, me too. I thought I was the only one. Because we're never the only one, right? And you being vulnerable is brave. And then sharing that with someone else lets them feel not alone and lets them be like, oh, maybe I can show up in this way too. And it's okay if I make mistakes. And it's okay if I'm not perfect because this person over here is not perfect. And I don't think she's the worst person in the entire world. So I might also be able to try something and not be perfect and not beat myself up like I'm the worst person in the entire world. Like it comes full circle. It's so funny, like this personal growth and this like, self-growth and personal development in this world that I love to live in is so interesting to me because it is so personal and it is so focused on yourself. But the more work that you do on yourself, it is amazing how easily that bleeds out into other people, right? Like in that example, you do this and someone else learns from that and then someone else and it ripples out. The work that you do on yourself makes a huge change in this world. And when we sit in our homes and we scroll social media or we listen to the news or we drive past the gas station and the gas prices are still way too high, right? And we fall into that like the sky is falling mode. And we want to change the world, but we don't know how. It starts with us and with that work. And one of the first steps is being willing to let go of that end goal of perfection and say, you know what? The more I'm showing up imperfectly means that I'm showing up in more places, right? The more that I'm willing to be imperfect means that I'm showing up more, I'm trying more things, I'm learning more, I'm growing more, I'm connecting more. living in an energy of imperfection is where I want to be. Because I know that that's where that growth is. I know that that's where that connection is. And where that, when you do take a step forward, when you do get a little bit better and you see some progress, that feeling is huge. So that's my goal for today. And I hope it made sense because, like I said, this idea came to me in like the midst of dreamland and like waking up in that like post-sleep grogginess when you're still trying to figure out if you're like in dreamland or like reality, right? We've all been there before. So I hope that this was conveyed in a good way. And I hope that this week you're willing to look at somewhere in your life that you can show up imperfectly. Until then, have an amazing week. If you want to show me and share with me where you're showing up imperfectly and how you're showing up imperfectly, or if you just want to chit chat about this, you know where to find me over on Instagram at positively.jessie. I'd love to hear from you. If you found this episode helpful, take a screenshot, please share it, send it to a friend, post it on your social, whatever like is your little way of how you like to share and how you like to put good things out into the world. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being here. Thank you for allowing me to show up imperfectly here and for having this be a place of growth for me as well as for you, and just for being a part of this community. You make it so worth it to show up and talk into this mic every single week. So have a great week. Thank you for hanging out with me again today. I'm so glad you pressed play. If you want to take a quick second to share this episode with someone you think would love it too, that would be amazing. If you're loving the show, make sure you go and leave a review on iTunes. Reviews are like magic for podcasts, and your review will help get this show into the ears of more amazing women just like you. And come find me over on Instagram. I'm there at positively.jessie, and I cannot wait to hang out with you some more. So until next time, have an amazing week.